Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today's the start of a brand new feature. I've been doing this Music Monthly feature over on my Instagram for probably about a year, maybe 2 years now, where I bring together the best new music of the month, the tracks that I've really enjoyed from all of the projects that have been released this month, as well as some of the singles, the loosies that have come out, just some things that might have flown under the radar or just you might not have heard of. While this reaction channel has been based mostly on new hip-hop and a bit of R&B over the time that I've actually had this channel, I listen to a wide variety of different genres, different artists, different music, and I'd like this feature to reflect it really. So I'm just going to go through all the tracks that I think have been sort of the best this month and explain a little bit why I like them. Before I get into it though, please do remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video. As I said before, content's going to keep coming quick and fast, so yeah, just make sure you stay tuned. So first up, it's Tory Lanez with the intro from his New Toronto 3 project called Pricey and Spicy. A huge important sounding trap intro. Pretty much a refinement of the operatic, bombastic trap sound that is the lane that I think Tory thrives in and is at his best. And it's also, I think, where he sounds most like himself, most unique. Think Lord Knows, Diego, all that kind of stuff, all the stuff he released to Fargo Fridays a few years ago. Yeah, just a fantastic intro. For me, the best track on the project, which I found a little bit hit and miss. You can go back and have a look at my full reaction to the project on the channel. It was a couple of weeks ago. Also think the homage that he pays to Pop Smoke on the track is a really nice touch as well. Gonna keep flying through these. So next up is Kid Cudi, leader of the Delinquents. Really enjoyed this track. It's a bit of a throwback to 2009, I guess, when Kid Cudi released his first ever mixtape, A Kid Named Cudi. Just an old school, almost boom bap rap track from Cudi, which is just really enjoyable, especially if you're a fan of that kind of music and if you're a fan of Cudi. Next is Isaiah Rashad with Why Worry. This is the first new music from Isaiah Rashad in 4 years actually, and it's typically warm, soulful cut, really fantastic sample used, and it's just great to hear from him really. Isaiah's bars are really easy listening, the hook's really catchy and sticky, just a really mellow track for him to come back with, and yeah, just a nice thing to whet your appetite before, hopefully, fingers crossed, Isaiah drops a new project. Then we've got the new collaboration from Travis Scott and Kid Cudi, again, as debut as part of Travis's game-changing Fortnite event, maybe so a week ago. It actually finally sees the student in Travis Scott and the master, Kid Cudi, unite for the first track of what appears to be an upcoming collaboration album, which is something that's really exciting. It's carnivalesque, it's eerie. Personally for me, I think Cudi really does kill it, as well as Mike Dean on the outro production, which is up there with some of the best he's ever done. Moving away from hip hop now, there's a new Gorrilaz track out featuring Peter Hook of New Order. The track's called Aries. I thought it was a fantastic track when I first heard it. It's very New Order inspired, which you would expect, featuring Peter Hook. It's pretty 80s with a hypnotic bass. Feels like the sort of music you'd listen to on a road trip, just sort of perfect driving music. Even sounds similar to something you'd hear on a movie soundtrack, so if you've not heard it, yeah, do check it out. Then we've got one of the new Frank Ocean tracks called Dear April. Just a beautifully stripped back piece of music that really spotlights Frank's vocals. Just a really gorgeously put together song, one that washes over you, and one that's just perfect for those people who already love Frank's music. Then you've got Uchis, who released an EP quite recently. My favourite track on the project was a track called Angel. I found the EP to be, okay, nothing on her last album, Isolation, which I thought was incredible. But yeah, I thought Angel was the best track on there. Just an airy sort of stream of consciousness sort of track, which again, I just enjoyed the most out of everything that was on that EP. Next up is the 1975. They continue to release music. It feels like every week they're releasing a new single, a new track. This one is called If You're Too Shy, Let Me Know. It's probably my favourite of the music they've released so far. They've got booming 80s drums, soaring vocals, and I feel like the lead singer's performance on this is really charismatic. I forget his name, But yeah, it just sounds very much like a hit. Speaking of surefire hits, we can't not mention Drake, who released Toosie Slide earlier this month. It's a chilled song that many have seen as a cynical attempt at TikTok fame, but for me the song has immense replayability. Lyrically it's nothing special, but it's a fun track that really shines when Drake switches up the cadences at different points in his verses. An artist signed to Drake's OVO label, Division, also released a project this month, and what a project it is, slightly more mainstream than the group's last effort. For me, the album's just overall a really great record. The standouts for me were the PARTYNEXTDOOR assisted Friends, and also another track called Outlandish. Friends doubles down on the sort of dark Toronto sound that I love so much personally, whereas Outlandish is a little bit more unusual in production. It sort of sees the singer, Daniel Daly, over a more sort of minimalist beat, but it also sounds a little bit like an evolution of early 2000s hip-hop, or a different kind of take on it. Next up, it's Find My Way by Dababy. It's not what you typically expect from Dababy, whose flow is often, repetitive, and a lot of his songs do sound similar. It's one of the records from his most recent album, which I think the reception of which has suffered just because of how much Dababy has oversaturated the market over the past couple of years. For me personally though, I enjoyed the moments where he did dabble in pop on the record, just because they sound different to other stuff that he's been throwing out there. So I really enjoyed Find My Way, and I also really enjoyed Rockstar featuring Roddy. Both feature this sort of twinkly guitar and throbbing bass, and see Dababy employ this sort of sing-songy flow that I think suits him quite well. Sounds like mid 2000s T.I. Also think Roddy absolutely kills his verse on Rockstar too. He kind of steals the show with his sort of unorthodox flow on the track. Now a track from an artist that I'd actually never heard of before, someone called Shawn. She's got a new track called Not Too Deep, which features the singer Black. It's a pretty much a traditional slow jam, but I think the vocals from both of them on this really are a treat, and just definitely one worth checking out if you've not heard of Shawn, much like me. Then we've got the remix to Megan Thee Stallion's Savage. I'm not personally a huge fan of Megan's music, just found it quite hard to connect to, but the beat for Savage is a hypnotic one. It's one of those ones that's just perfect for other rappers to freestyle over. But on this remix she's got the Queen, Beyonce, featuring on here, delivering a rap verse and some vocals, which really does bring the track to life in my opinion, and hence why it made it onto this list. Along with Rashad, other TDE members have been releasing music all week. That includes the R&B singer Sir, who released a track featuring a rapper called Boogie. The song's called Rapper Weed, and just sees Sir crooning over some of the hardest, very LA production that I've ever heard him over, for sure. Yeah, also just some of the hardest production in the year. Speaking of hard production, Westside Gunn released an incredible record with Pray for Paris. My favourite track on there was George Bondo, so that makes the list. Griselda are making big waves, and Pray for Paris is, for me, their most accomplished work to date. Production is just incredible, obviously very old school in its grittiness. Really does evoke Wu-Tang and Mobb Deep in its grittiness. These guys are obviously fantastic lyricists, but for me, George Bondo is the real standout, with just incredible guest verses from Conway and from Benny the Butcher. Next up is Bon Iver with Please Don't Live in Fear, a gorgeous track released in aid of the coronavirus frontline workers. Justin Vernon is obviously, as he always is, on top form in terms of performance, but there's also a really delicate, understated appearance from the singer Casey Hill, which I think really adds to the track. The humming production is very somber but very affecting, and it's one of those songs that's very much up the Bon Iver street, but still very good, and obviously for a very good cause. On to the new music released by Misch. Misch has this month released a collaborative album with jazz musician Yusuf Days, and for me it's potentially the best record of the year. All the tracks sound like really natural jam sessions, but there's a couple of standouts for me. It's Nightrider, which somehow Misch has got Freddie Gibbs, the gangster rapper, on this track, and somehow see someone like Gibbs on a track with these two South London lads who just embody the spirit of jazz. Misch's vocals are really dreamlike, while Gibbs continues to prove himself as one of the most underrated rappers out right now, but possibly ever. Another track I really enjoyed from this record is one called Tidal Wave. Yeah, definitely check out the whole album though. I think it was really brilliant. Next up, it's a remix of a Roux track, remixed by Tyler the Creator. The song's called Automatic Driver. Hard to describe this one. Just a cool remix in the vein of some of the production you heard on Tyler's last album, Igor. Just that same kind of lo-fi funk that everybody loved about Igor. So yeah, definitely check that one out. Moving on to some more like housey stuff now. UK group Disciples have released a track called Only the Gods. Really great song. Just a great example of some of the brilliant house tracks that are coming out of the UK still at the moment. This one, as well as the new Duke Dumont track called Nightcrawler, both of them, they sound quite similar and sound like two halves of the same whole really. I can just imagine these two being played back to back and just killing the dance floor whenever we're allowed back into clubs, into bars, into literally anywhere. Next is the new Florence and Machine track called Light of Love. It is pretty much standard Florence and Machine music, but her vocals are, you know, consistently amazing, and it actually reminds me very much of an early 2000s Snow Patrol sort of track in the way that it slowly builds to this great euphoric climax. There's also a weirdly sort of Christmassy feel to it, which, you know, I'm not averse to. Continuing the sort of British theme, the UK wave of this trap / drill / grime auto-tune mix, which is really taking off at the moment, continues. And there's two guys who are probably some of the best at doing it. That's Nave Smalls and M Honcho. In their collaborations so far, they really haven't missed. And Nave Smalls released a project this month called Goat World, which for me is really consistent, really good in terms of, you know, beat selection and stuff. But part of the plan is one of the singles and one of the main tracks on it, features M Honcho, and it's just a really fantastic track. I don't think either of these two have ever really been on a bad instrumental, and part of the plan really is just a natural banger and just adds to the duo's sort of growing list of hit collabs really. On that same project, you've also got a collaboration between Nave Smalls and Wretch Free 2 called Go Deep. It's very much in the vein of that, you know, pop dancehall thing that's pretty popular, or has continued to be popular since, you know, well, for the last 4 or 5 years, I'd say. Here it's done, you know, really well, and again, it's just one of those tracks that makes me want to go out party, and so I can't listen to it too much, especially not during lockdown. This month has also seen Heady One, the UK artist, release a somewhat controversial album that sees him, in my opinion, being a lot more musical, moving away from the drill sort of sound that made him famous. And I can see why Heady's sort of squeaky, auto-tuned, processed voice isn't for everyone, but I actually really enjoyed the project. It shows a bit of experimentation in the genre, which I really appreciate. I thought a lot of the production choice was really creative as well. For me, the standout track was a track called Charades, or Charades, as in the UK. And I know that was released a little while ago, but it makes the list for me now just because it came out on that project. I also thought the collaboration with Jamie XX was a really interesting one as well. The project as a whole has this like weird, sorrowful, moody atmosphere, and the reason I picked Charades as my favourite track from that is just because I think Charades epitomises the sound of the project more than any other track, I would say. Another really creative UK artist would be Octavian, who released a track called Poison, I think last week. His work's often hit and miss for me, but I find him to be one of the most innovative artists in this sort of lane. So I think he's obviously going to have some missteps, some things that do really work. I think Poison does really work. I enjoy the sort of African influence on this track, and I think his vocals fit really well on this kind of sound. Moving away from UK rap now, but staying in the country, there are a few other tracks from other UK musicians that I think deserve a mention. So there's this artist called Joseph, who for somehow is still flying under the radar, I've found, in the UK. He's got a pretty androgynous vocal. He's pretty mysterious as a character, and I guess you'd sort of categorise him as alternative soul. I've enjoyed every track he's released so far. He's, I think, only got one EP, but his latest track is called The Sun Is Up Forever. And again, I just recommend checking out all of his work. He's not got too much of it, but as I said, only just the one EP, but I'd recommend all of his work. He's got really, really strong choruses, like I said, a great vocal, and yeah, just it wouldn't surprise me if this is the year that you see him really blow up in the UK. Next is the new Jessie Ware single called Ooh La La. I'm a big fan of Jessie Ware. I thought her debut is one of my favourite records of the past few years. This track in particular is very understatedly funky, and I get a real sort of Pharrell Williams vibe, Old Neptunes vibe from it, without sounding very dated as well, which is an achievement in itself. Then you've also got James Blake, who released a track called You're Too Precious. Similarly to the Frank Ocean track I talked about earlier, it's a stripped back kind of piece. It's sort of sweet, warbly, there's lots of sort of vocal trickery going on, which has become, you know, James's sort of trademark. Definitely feels like an extension of, you know, his last album, Assume Form, which was, you know, really, really good. And yeah, just a really, really nice track. Then we've got Jack Garrett with Better from his upcoming album, which I think comes out mid-May at some point. I think it's just an outstanding pop rock record. The production on it's like pretty mad, pretty all over the place, but somehow works, brings together a lot of different sounds, and I could see this one being a real summer radio hit if we do ever get out of this lockdown. Similarly, S.G. Lewis has released a track called Chemicals, a very sort of funky pop hit. Reminded me a little bit of The Weeknd's recent work. Nothing too like crazy or out there, but I did enjoy it, and it definitely makes the list for me. Now a little bit of a throwback. The Dream, obviously immensely popular back in the mid 2000s. He released a mixtape appropriately called Sex Tape. I think it's Sex Tape Volume 4, as far as I'm aware. I found the majority of the project quite weak, maybe a bit dated and immature, especially considering The Dream is, I think, like 40 years old now, so it's a bit of a weird one. But there was a track on there called Take Care, which I enjoyed. I'd say it was the standout from the record. The Dream's obviously, you know, historically a great writer for himself and for others, but the sound of this tape really does feel sort of stuck in another era. But like I said, Take Care, good track to take away from it. Then of course we've got the song Righteous by the late Juice WRLD. Like Mac Miller, this is an example of, you know, posthumous music done incredibly well. It's a poignant reminder of all the potential that Juice WRLD really did have, and it really is quite dark and moody, but it's a really good example of the type of work that I personally preferred from Juice WRLD. He had quite a large catalogue for somebody who obviously wasn't making music for too long, but this sort of dark style, this sort of pained, emotional style, I guess, was the stuff that I enjoyed mostly from him, like Lucid Dreams and all that kind of stuff. I do hope that the posthumous album that I think will be coming is done as tastefully as it was done for Mac Miller. We've also got a new release from Lil Baby. I believe tomorrow he's releasing the deluxe version of his latest album, My Turn, and to, you know, promote it, he's released a new track to go with it called All In. I didn't particularly like this one on first listen, mostly because during the verses Lil Baby is like horrendously offbeat, but for me the hook is really, really good. Sounds as though it was written by somebody else, just because the way it's delivered and put together sounds like nothing that Lil Baby has ever done or anything that I've ever heard from Lil Baby. But again, I think the hook's so strong that it really does carry the song. And then last but not least, we've got a new release from Smino, who is another rapper who's sort of gone under the radar. He dropped a very traditional sounding mixtape last week. It's quite rough, with him spitting over hits like Roddy Ricch's The Box and Megan Thee Stallion's Savage. The standout for me was a track called Good Old Julio. Across the project though, it does feel as though Smino was sort of flexing his rapper muscles before the main event. I do believe he's got an album coming, I think in the summer at some point. But this track, Good Old Julio, as well as a couple of others, would actually have pride of place on an album. They're that kind of quality. For me, Smino definitely remains one of those artists to keep an eye on. And that's it. A lot of good music released this month, despite, you know, all the crazy stuff that's going on in the world. All this music will be on my Roundtable Talk playlist, which you can find on the Spotify link below. It's a playlist that goes back all the way to 2017, so there's a lot of good music to to go through there. Before I go, please do make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video. I'll be doing these every month, point you towards some music you might not have heard, but also other tracks you might not have given a chance as well. I hope also it gives a bit of an overview of the type of music that I listen to. Yeah, and I hope you're looking forward to next month's list. Keep an eye out for more content from me, more reactions, more reviews. But apart from that, thanks for joining me. See you soon.